Yeah, so today I'm going to be covering regular expressions 101. The topic was powerful field extractions for fun and profit. The alternate title was how I learned to stop worrying and love field extraction. But let's just jump in. Today, the takeaways. So today I'd like to basically impart the fundamentals of field extraction using regular expressions. Make sure you're comfortable with it. The other part was how they apply to Sumo Logic and how best you can use them in your query languages, in your search queries, as well as in the other configuration components of our platform. And number 3, C points 1 and 2. I was told there had to be 3 points. Who is this session for? Well, obviously you're here, so it's for you. But for users, it's really around having people who want finer degrees of control around how they extract out fields and the values out of their events. If you've ever used our Parse anchor, and I would say most of you have, there are some limitations in there in terms of the control you have on extracting the fields out, and we address those. For the admins, all things configuration. So Parse anchor doesn't extend into the other configuration components of our platform. So from here, we want to do field extraction rules. Well, field extraction rules you can with Parse anchor, multi-layered event boundaries, timestamp detection, and data processing rules. That's the one. And ultimately, anybody. So I'm laying down the foundations of regular expressions. So they apply not just within Sumo, but also outside of Sumo into a lot of other areas and applications, such as awk, sed, vi, and the like. Who is this not for? If this doesn't scare you, you should not be here. This is an actual regular expression. This is a regular expression that is meant to capture valid email addresses in headers. And I did not write this, just to be very clear. This is, and even the author of this says, this will not capture all of them. Scary. But I will not be dissecting this. And also, as you see here, if you have an irrational hatred of Australians or traditional English, we're not going to get along because I'm coming straight into your ears. Moving ahead. Right, now I've actually dodged me saying this because I didn't want to influence anyone here. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Right hands, who says RegEx? Okay, right hands, who says RegEx? Keep them up. Repeat after me. I will not say that ever again. Now, this is not just an Australian telling you this. This is the author of Mastering Regular Expressions, otherwise known as RegEx, in the O'Reilly book. It's a portmanteau, 2 syllables come together, RegEx. You're probably not going to change, but you'll remember me every time you say it now. Moving ahead. So what is it? I said I was going to start with the fundamentals, and we're going to build our way up. So it's a sequence of symbols and characters expressing a string or pattern to be searched for within a longer piece of text. Now that's just the general explanation. But how it applies to you as Sumo users, control. This will allow you greater degrees of control and flexibility in how you configure and how you use the platform. And I'm going to touch on all of those components. When would you use one? When you need that control. When there are inherent limitations of our Parse anchor operator. Now, this is actually a good example. So you can see, is this going to work? There we go. You can't quite see it, but the middle patch of text there. What if you wanted to capture the first 3 letters in the product ID? In a Parse anchor, you'd have to specify where to stop. Unfortunately, where you stop changes every single time. You could write 10 different Parse anchor rules, but this would be where regular expression would give you the degree of control that you really need to do this. And as I mentioned before, there are other applications outside of Sumo that you can use this in as well. RegEx fundamentals. The boring parts. Now, when you put in a regular expression, it's evaluated left to right, top to bottom, unless otherwise specified. They're case sensitive, unless otherwise specified. And we use what's called the RE2 implementation of RegEx. That's the boring parts. It's always going to be a challenge making this exciting for the last session on the last day of a conference, but thanks for bearing with me. So let's start with the basics. String matching. Literal characters, except what you see there. They are special characters that indicate capture groups, grouping, anchor points. I'll touch on them shortly. So if someone types in a literal A, well, you are going to search for a literal A. There and there. Someone does a regex for AP, which is a valid regex. It will be. You're going to search for AP. It'll skip over the A, and you have your Apache there. And when you want to search for a control character, escape it. So you can see that I've escaped the control character, comes to the first square bracket, and we're happy. Now, in Sumo, in parse statements, you also need to escape out the double quotes, because that's how you define the start and end in our parsing language. We'll come to that shortly. Character classes. Now, these are shorthand character classes, but they match against a specific type of character. So word characters, slash lowercase w. Their lowercase is important. /d, your lowercase digits. Oh, it's not lowercase digits. Lowercase d, numbers. The /s is white space. The line breaks, your traditional, your /n/r. Now, these ones are actually quite useful. The /W/D and the /S, these are the not white spaces. So not words, not digits, and not spaces. The most common one I've used, I've been playing this in this space for probably the better part of 9 years now, is the /S. It's really useful for space delimited events. You want to capture everything that is not a space and stop when you get to that endpoint. Character sets. This is where you want to match against a defined set of characters. This is why we can't use the square bracket as a literal. So for instance, A-Z, you want to write all lowercase letters. Now, I'll skip down to the third one there, A to Z, capital A to Z, and the underscore. Well, it's going to capture all of them, which is effectively identical to your /W. Now, if you just want to search for A-E-I-O-U, you'd use that character set. Now, the important thing with these is they don't really follow an order. Whatever order you specify them in, it's just like a bucket of characters. It can match against A-E-I-O-U. It can match against E-I-E-I-O. It can match against R-E. And then the one below it, and we're going to come to that soon, is the caret, which effectively negates everything that's in that character set. So I want to match everything except A, E, I, O, and U. And another really useful example is this one here. If I want to match against a not double quote, which is really useful, once again, when you want to match against strings that are in a double quote delimited file. The quantifiers. I'm going to put all this together in the next slide. So your asterisk, and I read a lot of books as a kid, so I keep calling it asterisks, but asterisk, match 0 or more instances. Now, the concept of greed, I'll touch on a bit later. Greed is not necessarily good. The plus symbol is match 1 or more. The curly brackets with one number in it says match exactly this many. If you keep it open, it will match that many or more. Match exactly this many between these two numbers. Or the lazy operator, which converts a greedy operator to a not greedy operator. And I'm going to come to that with a great example very shortly. So only match the minimum that satisfy. And finally, our friend, the dot. We call it a full stop. I think you call it a period. So it matches nearly everything. Letters and numbers, punctuation, white space. It doesn't match line break characters. So good example, this is as you see down the bottom here. If I want to capture everything from the start to the end, it's going to stop it when we hit a line break. And it should be used sparingly. Dot star will match as much as it can. So sometimes you'll write a regular expression to specify a field, and all of a sudden you see half your original message in the field name. It's probably because you used a greedy character. So good example here. As I said, it'll match anything. And so C dot star will match everything from the C right to the end of the line. Let's put it all together. So as the first thing I've said, characters, they are regular expressions. So if you write Sumo Logic, well, you're going to match Sumo Logic. Match one or more digits. Match 4 capital letter Bs. Now this is where we start actually putting it together. So I want to capture 3 lowercase characters and then followed by 1 or more numbers. And these are the kind of things you can put together to be quite specific about what you want to extract out of your events. Capture everything from A to Z. Capture anything up till I see the first A. And this is a good example of the gradient, of the countering the greediness of the asterisk. And I mentioned before, this is an example I've used quite a lot over time. Just capture everything up to the first time I see a double quote. Really useful for web access logs and things like your user agent field. Anchors. Now these don't necessarily capture things, but they allow you to specify a point to capture to, from, and around. So really useful again is the caret. So when not in a character set, the caret is the start of a line. The $sign is the end of a line. Now, the /b is a word boundary, which exists between a word character and a not word character. Sounds obvious. The reason I haven't put any arrows there for that is because I had one in an original slide, and on the first review, someone said, "Why do you have a slide with 37 arrows on it?" It didn't make a lot of sense. So pretty much any time that you see a punctuation or a space there, that'd be where a word boundary is. To be honest with you, I haven't really used it too much at the time. Right, this is where it's going to start to make a bit more sense as you go through and use it in Sumo, and I'm going to give you some Sumo specific examples towards the end. Now groups, you want to group things together. There's a few different types of groups. There is a capturing group, the first one there. Everything in there, you specify your regex, put it in parentheses, and that's what you're looking for. Your non-capturing group, I'm going to come to that in my next session. That's where you don't want to use it. You don't want to write it to a field, but you just want to make sure that that particular string is there and it follows, it actually, it honors the order in which you specify it. And I'll give you an example of that shortly. Oh, what have I up? Wrong button, there we go. This is the field name. You are going to see this a lot when you do your search parsing. So you write your regex and you specify the field you want to write that to. And the alternation operator, which is the pipe, or just call it what it is. It's the OR operator, which you can embed in a field name. So the most common example I usually use out there when I'm writing queries is if I want to look for any event that matches either info, critical, debug, warn, you can put them in as OR operators and capture them out. Grouping examples. So I think the first example here illustrates a really important point. A lot of users, when they first get into regular expressions, they feel like they have to write an expression that matches the entire first line or the entire event. Match it only to the point where it is specific enough to extract out the value you're interested in. So the good example here is, well, I want to catch the status, which you see up there, I've highlighted in yellow, and write that to a status field. But if I hadn't mentioned that HTTP 1 dot and a digit, then it might have just extracted out another number anywhere else in the line. So just be specific enough that it captures out your specific event, and it's pretty handy. Your social security numbers, we call them tax file numbers. So this is saying, if I see in my logs SSN equals, capture everything. I'm interested in everything that is not a space, 0 or more of. And what you see there, the log level, that's the example I gave you before. I want to find anything with a log level of debug or info. and the optional / lazy operator. I mentioned I was going to come back to this. So if you specify the lazy operator after any valid regex, it'll actually tell, or regex group, it'll actually tell you the previous statement is completely optional. So as you can see in the first one, I've said we're being greedy, so $f, capture everything past the first f because it's greedy, all the way up to the second one. But if I say don't be greedy, it's just going to stop when it hits the first one. Now here's some good examples that bridge our cultures together. Because here we can see color, aluminium, and I can't even say it. And couldn't care less versus could care less. And someone tells me that's not quite right, but you get what I'm getting at. And that's a good example of the optional character or the lazy character being used on a group as well. So I don't want to capture the N''T. Now let's put it all together. So we've got our character sets with quantifiers. We've got various levels of complexity. So this is a basic IP address, but you'll capture any 4 numbers separated by periods. Gets a little bit funky when we say, okay, well, I want to capture between 1 and 3 digits, followed by a full stop, period, repeated 3 times, followed by another number between 1 to 3 digits long. Won't be a valid number, though. Won't be a valid IP address necessarily, because that's going to capture any number, which is what you get down here, which is a bit scary. I would never type that, because you can always use the surrounding events to be quite specific about making sure it's an IP address that you captured. And I became a dad semi-recently, so I'm sorry about this joke. Yes. Yeah, it's true. Let's keep going on. And there's another good example of our operator, of our lazy / optional operator. Okay, let's get to the fun part. Let's figure out how we use this in Sumo. Searching. This is probably where 95% of you will live. Extracting out specific parts of your text and writing it to a field. Now, you must always have at least one capture group, which we see there, in order for it to be valid, and we will bug you if that's not the case. By default, it operates on the raw field, which is the raw event. Unless you can actually say, well, I want to operate on a specific part of a specific field, in which case you can say, okay, well, I've got my field name 1 here, and then I want to put a regex over field name number 1 and call it a new thing. And as I said before, you only need to craft a regex that is specific enough to identify exactly what you're interested in. Parse Regex Multi. Now, this is actually quite handy. What the multi does, and I think one of the first things I said is that a regex will only match one instance by default. Multi overrides that. So this is the best example I could find. So what you see here, this is a web access record. I think that event, that line there is think of it like an X-forwarded for. There's a multiple IP addresses I want to extract out and report on over time. Well, by default, if I don't have multi there, it's just going to stop at the first one, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I say multi, what's going to happen is it's going to extract out the first one and then continue where it left off. So we're going to have another field. It's essentially going to duplicate the field, but with a new value in there. So you now have an event with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there are 3 distinct IP addresses that match that. And here's some good query examples that I thought illustrate the points that we've covered so far. So remember that first example I gave you where the parse anchor wouldn't have worked? That's how you'd address that. Another lazy IP address there. Remember, we matched the first instance and we just yank it out. Now this is a good one, good illustration of anchors. So if I hadn't specified that anchor, I would have grabbed the first number I saw, which would be 10. But because I said the number I grabbed must be followed by the end of the line, I've extracted out that number and written it to a value, written it to the field duration. Once again, parse regex, specify multiple regular expressions and write them to different fields, so month, day. This is where I got a little bit funky. This is where you want to say, okay, I want to take out hexadecimal values, 2 of them, followed by a dash, 5 times, and then one last one, which will match this MAC address you see there. And last but not least, how we can actually say, okay, I need to extract out the timestamp from the first square bracket I see, all the way up to, I want to extract as many non-closing square brackets, and I extract that out to a field called timestamp. This is new. I think this was released about last week or the week before. This is our, you can actually leverage regular expressions now to do conditional where statements as well as replace statements. Now the use case that has been given to me for the replace is, let's say for instance you want to filter on a URL that you have in your log files, but there's one element of that, there's just random strings. We can actually replace that at search time, and you still have that kind of, you can still count by the unique values. The second one here, I didn't really have a good example for you until yesterday, where someone came up to me and said, hey, how can I detect in my events anytime I see a Chinese character in an event? And this is where we used a regular expression. Sorry, I wasn't allowed to update my deck. This is where we, you actually specify the Unicode characters to say, if I see something that looks Chinese or non-ANSI, then extract that out and show me. And for the admins, and for those who want to use field extraction rules, this is where, so for those who don't know, field extraction rule is where we do field extractions at the time of ingest. If you use fields that have been extracted out by field extraction rule, your searches will go a lot quicker. Now, this is where you set it. So it's essentially the same as a parsing statement as had it before, but you just write that into a field extraction rule, and we will write out the file name, the field names for you at ingest and make your searches run a lot quicker. And this one, I would say, has caused some angst over time, configuring multi-line events. I know our support team gets a lot of questions about it. The key here is you have to specify a regular expression that matches the entire first line. So from the caret, now typically, if you specify a date, something that looks like a date format, that's going to be enough because nearly all events start with a date format. And this would be the one time where I'd say absolutely use your dot star, just capture to the end of the line. And that means every event, like in multi-line events like stack traces, if it goes through and sees something that looks like a timestamp, it'll start extracting that as a new event. Data processing rules. This would be the difference between, you can for your include and exclude filters. This is a good example for debug. So sometimes people turn on debug all if you've got a networking background, or sometimes a dev might actually say, okay, I'm just ramping this up. This is a good way to control what gets sent through to Sumo as well. So this essentially says, if I see a capital debug surrounded by spaces in my event, don't send it to Sumo. Or if it's an include statement, only send it to Sumo. And masking and hashing. Now, what you see here, if I see user equals, so you do need a capture group here. If I see one or more not at symbols, so essentially the start of your email address, followed by an at symbol, followed by not, one or more not space characters, that's something I want to filter, mask, or redact. And this is something that was well received, I think it was later last year, custom timestamp configuration. If you have an event with multiple timestamps in it, and you want to extract out the third one as the source of truth, you specify a regex to say, I only extract out the time, well that's the format you'll see it in, but I only extract it out if it's immediately preceded by this string and closed by a square bracket. And finally, some of the gotchas. Some of the ones that could bite you and have bitten me. Nested capture groups currently are not supported by RE2. So what this is essentially saying is, this is actually regex compliant, but it says, I want to capture the protocol and the site, but I want to encapsulate that in a larger field called URL. We can't do that today, so you might scratch your head. I'm just saving you the heartache. I'm definitely saving you the heartache for this one. Do not attempt to get root domain out of a URL. Many people have tried and gone crazy, including myself. And if you do a simple look on Google, you'll see a bunch of people just go, just don't do it. What I mean by that is, say, for instance, you've got www.google.com and you just want to extract out the google.com. Sounds simple. Don't do it. And reckless greed. Use the optional statement wherever you can in your query languages, in your queries, because by using greed, you're forcing Sumo to evaluate every single character of an event. And if we're doing that, it's going to take longer. And last but not least, if you haven't joined the Sumo Dojo, which is our public Slack channel, it's slack.sumologic.com, self-register there. Hopefully you're all in there. Get a copy of the regex cheat sheet. You might have got one in your bag already, but if you don't, they're over at the expert bar over there. And express yourself. Practice regularly. And with that, that's me done. Thank you.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you guys.
It's a pretty exciting topic, I know.
From a Sumo Logic perspective, how do you filter out greedy regex or greedy clients that are running things that are impacting things in the back end?
That's a really good question. I think everyone heard that. What do we do with particularly greedy expressions? We do receive a notification when, say for instance, if you've got a customer who's put in a regex with a lot of different greedy expressions in it, there is an overhead to it. We will typically reach out and say, hey, you might want to rewrite that, because we do see it spike up. Outside of that, yeah, that we reach out to you to let you know. Got another question up the front? Feel free to tell me and I'll repeat it.
Yeah, so maybe it was just an example that you showed on the screen where you had a base search and then you added like conditions after that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a concept like that in Sumo where I can't have a query which I can use as my base query and write like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry to make you repeat that.
It's okay. Does Sumo has a concept where you can write a base query, save it as a query, and then extend with more work conditions?
Look, you can have multiple parse expressions. One of the things I didn't cover off was the no drop command, which allow you to write a regular expression that evaluates a text, but by default we drop events that don't match. By specifying the no drop after that, we keep those events around so you can keep adding to it and extracting out. Maybe if you've got an event stream with IP address found in multiple different locations in an event, then that'd be one way to do that, by creating additional parsing statements and eventually getting that fuller view of it. Awesome. Well, once again, everyone, thank you very much. Sorry, there is one more question. Hold your applause.
So when this might be related to RegEx stuff. RegEx, yeah. But
yeah.
So with that data processing rules, I was wondering if you were ingesting some of the metrics from CloudWatch, whether if you picked a service like Elasticache, whether you could filter out, let's say, all of the metrics apart from one.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's one of the features of the platform that I don't see used a lot, but it's there. You can actually use our data processing rules to really filter down the volume, because this all happens at the front door before it hits our ingestion queue. So you've got a lot of control there, and you can be quite specific about what you keep, what you filter, what you mask, and what you redact, and how you redact it.
Anyone else?
If you've got any questions, feel free to come see me at the expert bar or over a beer tonight. So once again, thank you very much, guys.